Well, good morning. What a crowd. Thanks so much. It's great to be back in Tampa Bay. All right, thanks so much. Please take a seat. We've got a great couple of announcements today, and I'm very fortunate that we've got a star-studded cast that's joining me, including our wonderful First Lady, my wife, Casey. Also, our favorite Green Beret, our Chuck Norris of Florida politics, Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins is with us. And our wonderful and leading Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. I hear there's an opening for a new CDC director. Maybe we can help send Joe on his way up there. I know I would support that. I think it'd be a great choice. And then finally, last but not least, our Commissioner of Education, Stasi Kamoutsis. I want to thank him for everything. We're also joined by Reps Valdez and Owen from the Tampa Bay area, and I appreciate them coming out for this. So we're here to talk about medical freedom, and in particular, highlight some of the things that Florida's done to lead the way, but then now show how we're taking that to the next level. And I know there were people that have always been involved in these issues, but I think most people have really gotten interested in this in the advent of how the medical establishment acted during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you had a situation where so many of these entrenched elites were turning towards coercive measures, trying to dictate your behavior through various non-pharmaceutical interventions, mandates, pushing products on people that they didn't want. And I think what people, because it permeated the entire country when the COVID-19 onset happened, people started looking and they started saying, okay, you know, you're telling me this, you're saying this piece of cloth putting on my face is going to save my life. Where's the data to back that up? Oh, there haven't been any controlled studies that show that those cloth masks stop infection? Oh, well then why are you telling me? Oh, just trust us, do it. And I think what we saw over the course of that is there were a lot of dictates issued, whether that was from Fauci himself or some of his minions, they were basically what they believed to be noble lies. And so they were telling you to put that piece of cloth over your face, even though there were no clinical trials that showed that would actually make a difference, because they thought that if you had a piece of cloth over your face, maybe you'd behave differently. So they were trying to induce you to behave the way they wanted you to behave, including putting out a lot of things that were just simply not true. And one of the things that I think was most devastating about some of these folks is, you know, some of these medical elites, including Fauci, they were all in on these lengthy school closures. You remember, I mean, I was here with our, one of Stasi's predecessors, Richard Corcoran, who's now the president of New College in Sarasota, which, by the way, was just ranked #1 public liberal arts college in America. You know, they say go woke, go broke. New College is kind of the opposite. We got rid of the woke, and now you have a massive enrollment, and test scores are going up, and you have classical education is back right down the road from here in Sarasota. In-state tuition like $6,300, and so I don't think you could do much better than that. But Richard Corcoran and I, in the beginning of COVID, I mean maybe 6-8 weeks into COVID, we said, listen, you can't have a situation where kids don't have access to going to school. So we put the marker down and said all schools in Florida, the public schools, must be open for in-person instruction. And you to think that we were trying to end the world with the reaction on that. We were attacked by the American Academy of Pediatrics, by Fauci, by all these different people who basically wanted these kids to, I guess, just sit at home. First of all, in virtual instruction is very limited. I mean, Florida does it probably better than others. It's not a substitute for actually being in the classroom. The teacher union in Florida sued us, and they were trying to stop my executive order, and they were trying to force the schools to be closed. So that's what we were dealing with 5 years ago when you were doing that. And we knew that we were right because we had actually looked at the data. And the reality is these young kids, fortunately, were not amongst the population that were significantly affected by this. It was certainly more akin to seasonal flu for them. And so we said, okay, so what are you going to do? Just keep them out indefinitely? It ain't like this thing just goes away. And some said, well, we got to wait till there's a vaccine. And I'm just like, no, I am not going to do that. So we said go, but we also told parents, hey, if you want to do virtual, that's fine. That's your choice. But you're going to have the option to have your kid be in school in person. And, you know, what happened was, I'll never forget, we won the lawsuit. It's a typical thing. You know, you hear this stuff. They're now hitting, you have a very leftist judge trying to stop Alligator Alcatraz. We appeal and all this stuff. But like, a judge ruled against us on schools. They said, oh, you can't force to be open. And the union was crowing. And I was like, well, we're going to win on appeal. And we did win on appeal for that. And so we won the court cases. So then you're having kids go to school beginning of August 2020. And like, there would be all these like legacy media outlets from like New York, CNN, ABC News. And they'd go and they'd be like, oh my gosh, Florida is having kids, and critics say they're sending kids to their destruction. And I'm just thinking to myself, these people have no concept. They are putting narrative ahead of evidence-based medicine. They are ignoring the data in favor of ideology. When they were saying follow the science, what they really meant is follow their political science, because that's what they were doing. So we put people in, we made sure people had access to schools, and we had a week go by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. The sky didn't fall. Kids were happy. In fact, we even had to fight the Athletic Association. They wanted to stop sports in 2020, and every one of their medical experts was saying, oh, you can't have kids do sports, COVID, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just thinking to myself, these people have no evidence for what they're doing. So you want to deprive, you know, these high school kids of football season, volleyball, all the other sports, without having a factual basis to do it. And, you know, we just let it be known, like, the state of Florida is going to have sports available for our kids. If you as a parent don't want your kid playing football because you're worried about COVID, well, you know, that's your decision to make, and we respect that. But we are not going to have some of these folks make that decision for everybody else. And so lo and behold, you know, we got the season up and running, and we had kids move from all around the country to Florida because they were barred from participating in their states because they didn't follow the actual evidence. So we were able to do all that. And I honestly thought at that point, after a few weeks, I thought the whole country's schools would just open, right? Because like, we're seeing the evidence in real time. We're seeing that this is something that obviously is appropriate. And you didn't see that. You know, you had teacher unions fighting this in Chicago, Los Angeles. You know, they would say, oh, it's too dangerous to go to school. And then you'd find one of these union people in the Bahamas putting pictures on Instagram. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So we led on the schools, which honestly, it was already tough, even having the kids in person, because there was a lot going on. I mean, society it was just a different time. So we made do as best we could, but I can tell you, had we listened to Fauci and these people, it would have been devastating for these kids. There's just no question about it. California, Illinois, these states did tremendous harm to these vulnerable kids. And you know what? What they would do is you would have people issuing edicts, and yet these elites, their kids were still going to private school in person, but they were shutting the public where they had the lower income and the working class kids that didn't have access to all these things. And so that was public health pushing an agenda. And it was one of the most harmful agendas to our kids that has ever been pushed in the modern history of our country. We were right in Florida, and they were wrong about what they were trying to do. You also look back and think about, I mean, I remember like in Florida, Memorial Day 2020, May of 2020, we got people were doing what Floridians do. They're on their boats, they're fishing, they're at the beach. And you would have thought the media is like scandalized. Oh, people are out. You have to be at home. You can't be doing all this other stuff. We had, I told the theme parks, I told the Universal, SeaWorld, I said, you guys need open. I was like, we're ready, with all this stuff. So Universal, started to get back up and running. SeaWorld, all those. Disney took a little longer because, they've got different viewpoints out in Burbank, and that's just the way it is. We've clashed with those viewpoints in Burbank a time or two. That's fine. It is what it is. That's what you do. But then they're doing that. And so all their fire was trained on Florida because people were able to make decisions. And but the public health elites and kind of the medical establishment, they were very much wedded to the idea you just need to be in your home, that you shouldn't be out doing all this stuff, which was wrong. Don't get me wrong, it was wrong to say that, but that's what they were saying. But what was really revealing was, as you get into the end of May, beginning of June in 2020, you have the BLM protests that turned into riots around the country. And they were protesting and like massive numbers of people going out. And so then the question was, well, wait a minute. You don't want people on a beach in Florida. You don't think people should be able to go to a restaurant indoors. You don't like the fact that, we have sports and all this other stuff in Florida. But I'm sure you're going to be just screaming from the mountaintops that you shouldn't have massive riots or massive protests with thousands of people, right? No. They did not object to that. In fact, you had hundreds of public health experts sign a letter saying, while it's inappropriate to protest against lockdowns, while it's inappropriate to be out doing things for fun, they said it was appropriate as a public health measure that you went out there and participated in the BLM protests, and even, of course, what came many, many riots. And so they say, we, the undersigned, support this, and we think it's vital for public health. And at that point, if you thought these people had any more credibility, come talk to me after this, because I got some oceanfront property in Arizona I would like to sell you. It was a fraud. And that was revealed that they were doing political science, not medical science. So you see that and you're like, man, what is going on with all this stuff? So, we obviously led the way going against the grain, and it's hard because, when you stand up, that I tell people, I've been around the block a few times, campaigns, leading on issues, everything like that. If you take all the incoming I've ever taken for any campaign, any issue I've talked about, all of that, my entire time, you add it all up, and then you compare it to the incoming I received during COVID, it's not even close. The COVID was so much more intense. So because this was a global thing, you had elites and a narrative that spanned continents. They wanted people shut down. They had an agenda that they were trying to do. And you got, the state of Florida that's basically telling them no. They didn't like that. And what they didn't want is they didn't want to have an A/B test. They didn't want to say, well, Florida has kids in school. Why doesn't San Francisco have kids in school? Florida, this place isn't saying you have to have masks. Why is that no different an outcome than the places that say you have to have all this stuff? That's what they didn't really want. So the vitriol was very, very intense. And, I would say when we were doing the things about, being open business, everyone can work, all that stuff, we're not going to let local government shut you down, all this stuff. We got huge blowback. Honestly, the decisions at the time were very unpopular, even with many Republicans who were scared and were listening to the narrative. But at the end of the day, leadership is about when the chips are really down, when people really need you. It don't matter if they're going to fire at you. You've got to be there for people. And people needed a voice of reason and sanity, and the state of Florida filled that void, not just for our state, but for the country. So we worked very hard, understanding we were cutting against the grain. We're like, you know what? You only live once. We've got to get all this done. We've got to make sure. So yes, the schools, the businesses. We were the first state in the country to ban vaccine passports. And you remember, we don't talk about it as much anymore, when the mRNA shots were rolled out in December of 2020, you started to hear, well, you shouldn't be able to go to this restaurant unless you show that you've gotten this. Movie theaters, sporting events, all this stuff. Fauci was in favor of that. You started to see blue states were doing that. You actually you go to eat in Chicago, you got to show this card that you took an mRNA shot for COVID, which, by the way, doesn't prevent you from getting COVID again. But nevertheless, that's what you had to do. I saw that for a huge threat to your freedom. And so we said, no state agency, nothing in state government, we're not doing that. We made sure local governments, and we pushed back. But I had some people on the right, because I said, listen, it's not enough to just say government can't do vaccine passports. I don't think the private sector should be allowed to do it either. Because you know why? They were just parroting what Fauci was saying. So the private sector in that sense was kind of an arm of the administrative state. They were following the narrative. And it's a situation where if these restaurants say you need this passport, this movie theater, that ballpark, everything, at what point are you free to make your own decisions? They're coercing you to make decisions by trying to make your life miserable because you didn't do what they wanted you to do. That was unacceptable. And so we nipped it in the bud in Florida. And had we not done that, I think you would have had vaccine passports nationwide. I really think so. And in fact, they were trying to do it. Biden got in by then, and they were trying to do it there. And one of the things some of his political advisors told him was like, if you go for passports, the governor of Florida is going to torch you for it. And it's true. I would have torched him. So we showed we're not doing that. And I even got in it with some industries because, some of the cruise lines wanted the passports. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And honestly, it was short-sighted of them to want to do that. What we did was not only right for people, but in the medium term, over the years, was definitely the right decision because Florida really took off. So we were able to ban the vaccine passports. We also, I had the legislature pass a Parents' Bill of Rights. And, you had all these schools, not all of them, some of the privates, not all, many of the school districts, but not all, that had school kid mask mandates. And that was not something that we thought was appropriate. There was no evidence that it was effective. There was, I think, at least anecdotal evidence that it could potentially be very harmful for these kids to be breathing through that 8 hours a day. But the reality was that's a parent's decision about whether they want to send their kid to school with that on or not. And so I did an executive order saying you cannot force kids to wear masks in schools in the state of Florida. And we got a lot of blowback from that. We got a lot of heat from a lot of the folks. But now looking back and thinking about that, how ridiculous was it that they were forcing these little kids? I mean, we've got a kindergartner, a second grader, a third grader. They even know how to wear a mask, even if I wanted them to. You don't wear it right. You're snot, dirt, all that. It's like, what are we doing here? And so we said no. We said that's a parent's choice. We were told, that was, I think people tried to say, you're a fascist for doing that. I mean, think about it. I'm liberating people from restrictions, and they're trying to say that that's authoritarian. So we were able to do that. No mask mandates through executive order, Parents' Bill of Rights. Then we had the issue of mRNA shots in our K-12 and university system, and we banned the mandates for K-12 and universities. The first state to do that. We did that very early on because I knew what was going to happen down the pike. And so I can tell you that there have been parents that have sent their kids to universities in Florida. I mean, not solely, but that factor that you did not have a mandate for mRNA shots was a huge factor in them choosing Florida over choosing some of these other places. And you know, these mandates just persisted. I remember I was out, where was I? This was probably a couple years into COVID, and I was at my baseball coach from up in Yale was retiring, so I went up to this final game to kind of see him off, and you know, I'm talking to people, and they were playing Harvard, so some of those guys wanted to talk to me, so I was just talking to them. And I'm like, are they still making you like wear masks and take shots? This is 2 years into COVID. And they're like, if it says this on our jersey, yeah, they're gonna make us do all this kind of crazy stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, that's not right. That's not right to be mandating this. And interestingly, they wouldn't mandate it for the faculty, only for the students. So the students are like the lowest risk for this, right? And that was a whole nother thing with the universities. We said our universities in 2020, our universities are going to be up and running. Oh my gosh, you'd have thought that we had, that got a lot of blowback. And you know what happened? Kids went, they had fun, they behaved like college students. Yes, they went to parties, they probably, you know, went to establishments. I'm not advocating, you know, that all college students should be doing that, but I'm also not naive enough to think that they're just going to sit in their apartments or their dorms all day. So that was happening. And you know what? Some people would get COVID, and you'd have a little wave, and then the wave would subside, and like nobody went to the hospital, right? And so it's like, are you trying to tell me that that is worse than trying to isolate them in their apartments and doing that? No. I mean, honestly, suicide went up in some of these areas where they were very coercive and restrictive. So you're talking about the group of people who are at like the least risk of COVID, and you're saying somehow that they should be forced to take an mRNA shot. So we nipped that in the bud very early on. We also made a decision that the way this spun out of control, it really impacted people's basic civil rights. So we said you cannot be forced to wear one of these masks as a condition of being able to live your life. So that means you go to a movie theater, you go to a store, you go to school, you do whatever. That's a personal decision. And some people didn't like that. It's like, well, if a business wants to force you to wear a mask, shouldn't they be able to do it? And my view is like, honestly, no, I don't think so. It's irrational. And it's like we can just sit there and say some people are going to be marginalized to do it, or we could just say, no, in Florida, you have the right to be free. You have the right to make your own decisions. You can participate in society without having these unscientific dictates imposed upon you. And then maybe one of the most contentious ones was, and you know, this is stuff like, you got to listen to people. You know, so many of these people in office, like they pay all this money to do polls and this stuff. Like I've never done a poll since I've been governor because I don't need a poll to tell me what's right. I do what I think is right, but I take feedback from real people and actually listen to folks. So as we got into 2021, mRNA shots are out. Everyone was saying initially, oh, no, it's your choice, no mandate. Then all of a sudden you started to see the coercion. So I had people come to me like, you know, I have like, you know, 3 more months, and they say I've got to take this. I don't want to take it. My wife doesn't want to take it, whatever. And I would hear this over and over again. And, you know, people at that time, it's almost like they're whispering, because to suggest that you didn't want to do it was like, oh my gosh, are you, you know, it's like you have leprosy or something, like, oh, just, you know, shunned. And so it was a very sensitive thing. And so I'm thinking to myself, and then I had like private sector, I had like police and firefighters around the state that are coming to me and doing this. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm just like, you know, nobody in the state of Florida should ever have to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. So we worked with the legislature to pass employment protections for folks, basically non-discrimination, to where they can't base hiring and firing decisions on whether or not you took the COVID mRNA shot. And that saved the jobs of thousands and thousands of people throughout this state. We also looked and see, okay, there's a broader context here, what's going on. And one of the engines for, I think, a lot of bad policy was the World Health Organization, WHO. And at the time, Biden was president, they were working on this lockdown treaty. They call it a pandemic treaty, but basically it would have taken sovereignty from the U.S. and other countries and vested it in a unelected, whatever it is, organization funded by the CCP mainly, and then somehow they would be issuing edicts that are going to affect our health and freedom. No, not on my watch. And so we passed legislation in Florida saying Florida does not recognize WHO dictates, whether it's the lockdown treaty or anything else. Now that President Trump's in, I don't think it's got legs at this point, or at least we hope it doesn't. And so that's very good that we were able to win that battle. But they're always trying to do more and more stuff, and we're making sure that we're doing everything we can to be able to support the people. Now, you also have things like, and this is just crazy, you'll have like some like 14-year-old girl that needs some type of medical procedure, and she'll go in, and if she hasn't gotten a flu shot or a COVID jab, then they won't see her, and they won't do the surgery. And I'm thinking to myself, how insane is that you're not willing to treat somebody? So some of these policies that have been put in place in some of these medical institutions are insane. So we said in Florida in legislation, no, like if you need a lung transplant or something, they can't say, well, we'll only do it if you do the COVID shot. It's irrational. It's not based on any evidence to be doing that. But that's something that's really, really important to me. So we've done a lot over the years to really, I think, be on the right side of fighting against the hysteria. The reality is these elites, they just lost their way. I think some of them just probably didn't really know what they were doing, but I think others really saw that they were getting power for the first time in their lives. This was kind of the Super Bowl for them, and they wanted to use that for all they could. And they really abused their positions of trust that so many had placed into them. And I think the credibility of so many of these institutions and so many of these, it's done. Just totally up in flames over how they handled the COVID-19 pandemic. And so Joe Ladapo has been great. I think he's probably the only Surgeon General who during COVID said, the mask isn't going to save you, that was willing to say, all kids should be in school, that was willing to say kids should not be taking mRNA shots, all the things that really cut against the medical establishment. And I think on every instance he's been proven right on that. But it takes courage to do that. There's a lot of professional blowback that happens when you stand up and do what's right. So that has kind of, I think, crystallized for so many people, hey, there's a lot of issues that we got to deal with medical. And medical freedom is something that we've got to be very conscientious about protecting, especially given how we've seen so many elites lose their way. So Joe Ladapo, myself, the First Lady, we've been pushing on a lot of different fronts to be able to continue to advance the ball. We have great announcement today, regarding kind of the state of Florida's efforts to continue to promote policies that are linked to medical freedom. They say make America healthy again, the MAHA. We were doing that before anyone was even talking about it in Florida, and that's just the truth. And so some of our guiding principles are, one, information given to individuals where then they can make an informed decision should be the bedrock of how we function in terms of health and medicine. Informed consent is the touchstone for everything that goes on in this area of American life. And what flows from that also is the primacy of parents to be able to direct health decisions for their minor children. The reality is each individual parent has different views, different children may have different needs, and we ought to be empowering parents rather than trying to take away the rights of parents. And one of the things I think is very destructive that's happened more recently is this practice of these pediatricians who will not see kids unless they take all of these shots, and it's just, that's not right. And it's like you think about it, it's like there's been an effort, and I think COVID really exposed it, to say you have to do this. And if you say why, well, you just have to. Okay, well, what's the research show? What do the trials show? What do all this show? And I think about something like a newborn baby. Do they need that hepatitis shot? It's like, what's the rationale for it? I mean, we know how you can get that. Okay, so a baby needs that, and then if they do it, are there drawbacks for it? And usually they just tell you there's never a drawback for anything. Let me tell you, anything you take could have a potential drawback. I mean, that's just the reality. So we really want transparency. We want people to be able to make the best decisions that they can. But some of this stuff, if you look back when I was growing up, what they would recommend now, they're recommending like way more stuff for this. And so I think a lot of parents, what they want is they want to be able, you only get one shot at raising kids, right? And you want to make the best decisions that you can. And what you don't want to do is to do anything. My view is unless there's a really clear reason to put something in, then I wouldn't do it, right? I mean, that's just the way kind of I am. If you don't just say, well, maybe it'll help you. No, I mean, does it help you or not? And you should have that. You should be very clear in all that stuff. So we want to do that. So informed consent, making sure we're protecting parents' rights, and then also just being willing to challenge medical orthodoxy that's not supported by the data. And there's a lot of data out there that's proven certain medical interventions are effective. Great. We love to see it. I mean, we've made great strides in treating different things, but you also have a lot of stuff that gets put out there that if you peel back the onion, okay, what's the basis for that? And COVID showed that tremendously. I mean, literally, they were doing studies about masks where they would say, well, this barber was here, this person was here, this person didn't have COVID, this person did. One had a mask, one didn't. And it's like, that's not a study, guys. That's an anecdote. And yet they would put that out, and the media would run it. CDC study shows masks are effective or whatever. And they weren't real studies. They weren't real clinical trials. So we know kind of the tricks on this, and we want to make sure that we're exposing this. And so I'm happy here to be here today to make the first announcement, and Joe Ladapo is going to make another announcement. But today I'm pleased to announce the establishment of the Florida MAHA Commission as a working group which will recommend state-level integration of these Make America Healthy principles. And those principles are, as I mentioned, individual medical freedom, informed consent, parent rights, and also market innovation. It will be chaired by First Lady Casey DeSantis and our Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, and will also include Surgeon General Joe Ladapo, AHCA Secretary Siobhan Harris, DCF Secretary Taylor Hatch, Elder Affairs Secretary Michelle Branham, Department of Environmental Protection Secretary Alexis Lambert, as well as experts in the fields of nutrition, health, vaccine safety, and family practice. The commission will have several main objectives, including, and Joe Ladapo does a good job on this, promoting clean, safe, and nutritious food industry, improving transparency and accountability in healthcare, working on the causes of chronic diseases to identify and prevent future occurrences, and, maybe more importantly, restoring trust in the medical profession and in public health. The Florida MAHA Commission will prioritize reforms that empower Floridians, reduce regulatory burdens, and hold actors accountable for their conduct while fostering incentives for healthy living and innovation. And I think that this is something that has great potential. We've already done a lot, and I don't think there's any state that has done even close to what we've done in the state of Florida over these many years, but there's always more to do. We always want to stay ahead of the curve, and I know Joe Ladapo is somebody that has been working on these issues in a number of different ways. He has put his neck out to speak the truth, knowing that he's not going to necessarily receive a warm embrace by some of the people in his profession, but that's really what courage is all about. So I'd like to invite him up here today to be able to make our second announcement. Joe, come on.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for hosting us. What an awesome crowd we have here. And, you know, that was wonderful hearing the governor. You know, one of the things I love about listening to him is he's a storyteller. And some people, I'm not a storyteller. I don't have that gift. But some people are storytellers, and it's just so fun to hear them, you know, recount history and talk about things. And it's always, I mean, it's such a pleasure for me to be able to hear the governor talk about what's been happening over the years, and everything there is true. Like, you know, it's just this sea of insanity, and this you know, endless effort to enroll every living human being in this country, on the planet, in this insanity. And, you know, and just thank God. And we forget so often, we forget too much as human beings. And I guess it's the human condition, right? I mean, sometimes it's great when we forget things that weren't so good, and maybe sometimes it hurts us a little bit that we forget things that were really, really good. And what was exceptional is how Governor DeSantis basically single-handedly, you know, saved the country and, frankly, maybe the world by serving as a single, by serving as the single example of something that was completely oppositional to the hegemony that the rest of the world was either succumbing to or bowing down to, or being, you know, threatened into bowing down to, into subduing to. And you know, we came so close. You know, he said that if it weren't for what Florida did, we may have had vaccine mandates throughout the entire nation. And it's absolutely true. You think back to that period of time, remember all the energy, how all of that energy was ginned up, right? Remember how it was when you know, everyone on television, all of these medical leaders were, Dr. Fauci, other people were convincing everyone that the world had to shut down. Everything had to close, right? You get that amount of energy behind things, and unfortunately, you're able to change the world, and they did. And they did shut down the world. They shut down this country, and they created tremendous harm in the process, and they were wrong. And that kind of thing can happen. You know, oh, how did that ever happen? You read history. Well, guys, sometimes crazy things happen. And we were in one of those moments where not only did crazy things happen, but even crazier things could have happened. You know, and thank goodness, thank God for Governor DeSantis and the steel of his nature to not bow down or bend to fear, you know, and criticism. You know, thank God. And for, you know, there's so many individuals out there too who, you know, they may not have been governor, but they were fighting in their own lives. And thank God for their courage. And it took all of that to get us to a place where we are now, where everything is, you know, heading in a better direction. But that was not assumed. Like, that was created. It was created by the will of people who, you know, who fortunately are reflections of God's light against the darkness of tyranny and oppression, which is, you know, unfortunately ever present in this world and in this country. So we do have some great announcements to make today. So you know, and we're gonna hear more about the Florida MAHA Commission, but what I'm most excited about is an announcement that we're going to make, that we're making now, which is that the Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Yeah. Yeah. Every last one of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. Okay? Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God. What you put into your body, is because of your relationship with your body and your God. I don't have that right. Government does not have that right. They want you to believe they have that right. And unfortunately, they've been successful. They've been successful. Pretty much every state has them. It's wrong. It's immoral. They do not have the right to tell you what you put in your body. They don't have the right to tell you what your kids have to put in your body. They do not have the right. Do not give it to them. Take it away from them. And we're going to be starting that here in Florida. And I love our lawmakers. Obviously, they make the machinery of our laws. Our governor reviews. We work in collaboration. He signs. I love our lawmakers. They're going to have to make decisions, right? That's the way that this becomes possible. So people are going to have to make a decision. People are going to have to choose a side. And I am telling you right now that the moral side it's so simple. No one has that right, guys. People have a right to make their own decisions, informed decisions. You want to put whatever different vaccines in your body, God bless you. I hope you make an informed decision. You don't want to put whatever vaccines in your body, God bless you. And I hope you make an informed decision. And that's how it should be. That is a moral, ethical universe, not this nonsense where people who don't know you are telling you what to put in your temple, the temple of your body. That is a gift from God. They don't have that right. One of the counter arguments you'll have, and I would even care more if it was actually sincere, is that, there are people who, they can't take a particular vaccine or, whatever reason they're compromised, and therefore everyone else has to do something because of that situation. And absolutely, right? I've got 3 kids. I'm a parent. My kids are a little older now. They're 6, 8, and 12. And I remember particularly when they were smaller, there's nothing like, your heart literally leaps out of your chest when you're worried about your kid's health, and then especially when they're smaller, but really any age. So I understand that, I get that. But that is also that's also part of the experience of life. And it is not right. There's no basis. There's no ethical basis for that to be used as a reason, really a force to take away your ability to choose what you put in your body and what you as a parent put in your child's body. That's your right. And it's not that the world is perfect. The world is imperfect. It's not that sometimes people will end up regretting the decision that they made. And we've seen a lot of that during the COVID-19 pandemic. How many people put that poison in their bodies with these mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and wish they could turn back the hands of time and undo that, right? So it's not to say that the world is perfect, but it is to say if we want to move toward a perfect world, a better world, you can't do it by enslaving people in terrible philosophies and taking away people's freedoms. That's not the path. That's not the path. We have to find alternative pathways, okay? So let me see, was there any other announcement I want to make? So here's what we can do in the Florida Department of Health. We actually have the ability to start that process with what government folks call rules. So the Florida Department of Health, we have some rules that we promulgated, not me, predecessors, that include a handful, maybe a half a dozen vaccines that are mandated in Florida. So those are going to be gone for sure. So those are gone, and we're going to be working with our with our amazing Governor DeSantis and our wonderful lawmakers to get rid of the rest of it. We need to end it. It's the right thing to do, and it'll be wonderful for Florida to be the first state to do it. So I think that's it for announcements. So thank you guys very much. Lots of love to you guys. Thanks, Governor.
Well, thanks, Joe. And, now I remember back in COVID, actually, when COVID really hit the fan in March of 2020, my better half was in the hospital having our third child, and it was a very empty hospital and very eerie, and I was trying to be with her. I'm talking to Deborah Birx and Donald Trump and all this stuff, trying to explain to them why I was doing what I thought was right in Florida. And meanwhile, we had our third child. But then it was like, okay, we're in there. We had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and then the newborn. And we're just thinking to and she's like, I am not putting a mask on these kids. Like, it's just not normal, not especially at that age. And so we've, I think, just as a family, have kind of been more in tune to this stuff as a result of that whole COVID experience than we had been before. And, I think that's true for a lot of people. So she's done a lot of great work on empowering parents, empowering families, and she is the great person to be able to be chairing this Florida MAHA Commission.
Well, these are a couple of tough acts to follow. One thing he fails to tell you is that our baby Mamie was born during the 15 days to slow the spread. So there was that. So it was right in the heat of everything, and he literally was on the phone while I was giving birth. I kicked him out, and I was like, this is not going to work for me. Go fight the good fight, but I'm going to do my thing, okay, and I'm going to be a mama. Which was, obviously now, if you look back, Mamie, if you can believe that, she was born in 2020. She's 5 now in kindergarten. And so it was just a blink of an eye, and it's so fast, and you just cherish every moment that you have. But, between the two of them, I've hit up Dr. Ladapo many of times when I see him, just walking down the street or the hallway or whatever, and, we get into these conversations about why this is so important. And even the gov, I'll sit there with Ron in the morning and we're drinking our coffee and, something will get a burr under my saddle and I'll be, talking to him about why this is just so eminently important. And honestly, how proud I am of both of them for having the courage to stand up for what's right. And I will tell you, I have a unique perspective on all of this because I can watch from behind the scenes. I see him in front of the cameras. I see him in front of the podium. I see Dr. Ladapo out there fighting, but I see the incoming. And then I see how he acts like a steely-eyed missile man with a heart of gold who puts himself in front of the freight train to protect your rights. And to me, that is the epitome of service, standing up on behalf of you because it's the right thing to do. And I'll forever be grateful for both of them and what they've done. And I've been chomping at the bit for a long time. As he mentioned, this is something that we've been working on. He has been, obviously, in the legislature, and there's been some really good policies that have helped protect patients and parents, and it's been fantastic. But for me, this is kind of personal in a couple of ways, and one of which is, I had my struggle with cancer. Dating back to the diagnosis was 2021, if you look back on it, getting on, 3 or 4 years now. And, the question that everybody asks me is, well, surely you had a family history, surely you had a BRCA gene, surely there was some kind of connection there. And I say no. Like, I had no significant family history. I didn't have the BRCA genes. So how is it that, a mom, relatively young, right? I'm getting older every day, but relatively young. I think, $125 wet. Like, I'm not like, I think I'm eating healthy. I think I'm doing the right things. I think I'm exercising. How does somebody, like me, and I get this question, end up getting breast cancer? in a pretty aggressive form. And that's one of the things that fueled me, because COVID opened my eyes to a lot of things. They were shoveling a lot of narratives and agendas at us, and I wanted to know what's the truth. And so for me, when I got sick, I wanted to know why. And I remember asking one of my cancer docs, I said, how does this happen? I have a 1-year-old at home. How do I have breast cancer? And he kind of looked at me, he's like, man, if we knew the answer to that, I'd be a really rich man and I wouldn't be here treating cancer. And so it's like, but what is it? What's going on in society when we see, obviously, the cancer rates going up? We see the reoccurrence going up in some capacities. And so it's like you really want to take a deep dive into this. And we started to do it a little bit with a cancer collaborative that we started. And so there were some main tenets to that, one of which was investing money into good hospital systems to promote research, quality of care, better outcomes for Florida taxpayers. That was a big deal. But then also looking at the data, but also really getting to the root cause. One of the tenets was, what are we doing to be able to help best inform people so they can make the best choices to protect themselves and their family? Because I'll tell you what, from the bottom of my heart, I hope to heck that nobody has to go through what I went through. When you get hooked up to these machines and you're doing 6 rounds of chemotherapy and 6 weeks of radiation, and my left arm doesn't work as well as the right arm, and it's been kind of a hot mess, but I battled my way back a little bit. I don't want you to go through that. And if there's something that we know that's out there that can help protect you from getting sick, gosh darn it, we owe you that, to be able to give you the best informed data points and information so that you can protect yourself and you can protect your family. And, and I've done a lot of research on my own, and it's limited, and I defer a lot to the Surgeon General, who's very, very astute in a lot of this stuff. But I started researching it and reading books about food. I mean, it's what we're putting into our bodies after all, right? That's a big part of this. So I was researching, yes, processed is bad. Yes, these things, these chemicals we're putting in our body, but also why it's so important that we eat well. Sometimes we think that we're eating well because we want to look good in a bathing suit and you don't want to get overweight. But there's really boiling down to the cellular level. I remember one lady who went through breast cancer, she told me, you must eat broccoli and pineapple. And she was, broccoli and pineapple. So I eat broccoli and pineapple every day. But, the question is why and what is truth? That's the other thing, because there's so many sources out there where there's so many lanes of information, and you're combing this as a consumer and a mom, right? And you're trying to figure out, as a cancer survivor, what is truth? You'll see a study that's out there in some publication that's talking about why this is so great. But when you peel back the layers of the onion, you find out that that study was put on by a company that makes a product that actually helps solve X, Y, and Z. And oh, by the way, the publication that posted it is pay for play, and so they're actually getting money from the company, so you don't know what to believe, right? And it's just very frustrating. So it's like, what is truth? And that's true for a mom of an 8, 7, and a 5-year-old, because, just the other day, and I didn't tell you this, I don't know why there were corn dogs in the freezer, but that's another story for another day. But Madison was hungry, and there is a massive bag of corn dogs. Like, they're these little itty-bitty corn dogs. Anyway, in the freezer. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And so she wanted those. And I'm like, because I knew this MAHA thing was coming up, and I was going to see the Surgeon General. And so I said, I'm going to look at the ingredients. And I'll tell you what, if you dumped all of those corn dogs out of that bag, and you just looked at the ingredients, and I said, what am I going to give to my kids? You wouldn't know what the heck it was. I didn't see a corn. I didn't see a dog. I don't know what it was. And I dumped it in the trash, and I said, the heck with this. I was like, no, Madison, we are not eating corn dogs. And we moved on to the next thing, whatever that was. As long as it wasn't my cooking, she was happy. It was fine. But it's like some of this stuff is marketed towards kids in a really deceptive way, and I want to know truth. Just tell me as a mom what I can do to give my children the best opportunity to be healthy. Tell me what is the right balance of the right things that they need to be able to grow up and to be happy. After all, that's what this is all about. So in my view, in America, you have the right as a corporation, if you're selling a product, to succeed, to create a product, to be able to take that product to market. But you don't have the right to put chemicals or poisons in our food supply at the expense of our health, our well-being, the health and well-being of our children, to the benefit of a company's potential revenue, stock price, or return on their investment. And so our families, in my view, should not serve only as revenue-producing units for corporations. And I know that, you would hope that no entity would knowingly utilize harmful ingredients that could potentially cause adverse health consequences. And I agree when Secretary Kennedy, who has headed up the federal MAHA commission, when he says that chemicals generally recognized are safe entering our food supply, that's not sufficient, because chemicals treated as innocent until proven guilty is not fair for our families. We have the right to know what is putting in there. If you think it's generally safe, well, that's not okay for me to give to my 8-7 and my 5-year-old. So I really applaud what they're doing at the national level with the MAHA movement, and I appreciate that leadership, and I really look forward with this commission to be able to get out there and do some really good stuff and to be a force multiplier to all of this through the Surgeon General, the Lieutenant Governor, the agency heads, and others to really shape and yet again lead the way in the free state of Florida to empower people with the truth, and then you make the decisions that you think best for your family. After all, what is the role of government? Not to force you to do something, but to empower you with the best information at the time so you can feel empowered to do what you think in your heart is right. And we also look forward to empowering Floridians, as the Surgeon General has mentioned, to make the best informed decisions as it pertains to vaccines and pharmaceuticals. And yes, understanding, okay, what is the upside to potentially taking a drug or a vaccine, but also what do the studies and the evidence show? And be forthright and transparent about what the studies may be lacking, or the fact that there might not even be a study at all, whether it may be looking at the long-term implications about taking a certain kind of pharmaceutical, or even looking at like the vaccine schedule. For instance, I had a friend who had a child who went in to go get caught up with her vaccine schedule, and she told me that she had been really delayed on a lot of her vaccines, and the pediatrician at the time told her, well, it looks like you need 9, you might as well just do them all while you're sitting here. And she goes, I'm not a physician, I just don't, has that been studied to have all of these vaccines, 9 vaccines on a little kid at one time? And he goes, well, the CDC doesn't give us any guidance, this was a while ago, doesn't give us any guidance, so you can do whatever you want in this office setting. Well, I think we should be informing people about what it means if you're going to be doing a lot of these in one sitting, or what does this mean to the overall long-term health if you're doing some of this stuff. People have the right to be in the driver's seat, that's for sure, and they have the right to be able to know what's being put in their bodies, and they have the right to feel like they have enough knowledge to make informed decisions. And so, one of the things I'll kind of close with, and I think it's important, when we look at pharmaceuticals in general, and this is something that I've really kind of researched and I look forward to getting into the commission more with, is a lot of these drugs, you don't need them if you live a healthy lifestyle. If you're eating fruits and vegetables, you can reverse a lot of these chronic conditions. And when you look at America, 76% of all adults across the United States of America have at least one chronic condition. And so there's an analogy that a friend gave me about a tack in the shoe. Sometimes you have a tack in your shoe and it hurts. So you get medication or whatnot to help with the pain, but you never take the tack out. You never get to the root cause of a lot of this stuff. And getting in front of it, healthy eating, good nutrition, and the why. It's not just to look good in a bathing suit in the state of Florida, but the why. And it's not for anybody to tell you, but it's to provide the best information that we have so you can make informed decisions. And one more thing that I'm really excited about with this commission too, is we look at some of the things that we've mentioned. It's also other ways to improve the health, beyond just like the food and that sort of stuff. For instance, like fasting, okay? If it is as beneficial as some who have really touted its unparalleled success, then why are we not talking about this more? Why aren't we talking about intermittent fasting? Why aren't we looking at some of it? Why aren't there more studies? Why isn't it, if it is as good as what you can hear people say it is out there, why isn't there more public discourse? Well, maybe because you can't monetize it. Just throwing that out there. So it's like, what is beneficial that we can do to be able to help people? So, I'm honestly, this is something I have been super excited to do for a long time. It's an honor and a privilege to stand up and fight for mamas and for families and for people to be able to make the best decisions so that they can be happy in this great American experiment. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much. And I just want to be very clear, those corn dogs in the freezer that she did, that does not apply to the corn dogs at the Florida State Fair. Those are different. Let's just be very clear about that. No problem. You let her rip. Yeah. So I really appreciate, and she knows what she's doing, because like she'll literally talk to my ear, well, you're eating that, they made this and that, and it's like I never, most of my life I've just been on a seafood diet. You see it, you eat it, and when I'm playing baseball through college, fine, military, fine. As you start to get older, it's like you change, and so you gotta be more disciplined on this stuff, and you gotta know what's good, what's not. But one of the things I've noticed with having kids is our 5-year-old. If there's like colors, like ice cream has like blue, that's what she wants. So like the coloring and stuff, like it really does make a difference. Our son is 7. He's got some of these WWE wrestlers that are touting some of these food. Man, that's what he wants, right? Because so you definitely see, and like I'm sure I was that way when I was a kid, but you do appreciate how some of this stuff, was get this kid, do all this stuff going forward. And I don't think we've ever been in an ice cream store where the kids, if there's like a blue Magoo, they go for blue like that just because of the coloring. They love the coloring. And I'm just thinking to myself, that mint chocolate chip is better. They don't want to listen. They want the coloring. So I've definitely seen that. Co-chairing the commission is Florida's Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, who's from Tampa, and has been a really great public servant, not only as an elected official. He was the senator over there for years, but also as a military veteran, as a Green Beret in elite special forces. Was able to he risked a lot for this country and gave a lot for this country, including one of his legs. And he was in a situation, he had served for a number of years. I always say, he lost the leg. He reminds me, he didn't quite lose it. He knows where it is. It's just not on his body anymore. But he had to make a decision, how do you, what do you do at this point? And he decided to try to be the first person in the history of the Army to re-qualify for special forces with a prosthetic leg. And he did it, and he succeeded, and he served 5 more years. When he's the operations officer for a great charity, OBR, and they basically come after hurricanes and disasters, and they're there on the ground before just about anybody. They're feeding displaced residents, first responders, you name it, and he's done that through all of our major events since I've been governor. And then even more recently, we had the Iran-Israel conflict breakout. We had a lot of Floridians that were over in Israel. A lot of parents had kids who were in college that were studying abroad or going on a tour. All of a sudden, the airport shut down, ballistic missiles are raining, so we, through the Florida Division of Emergency from Cyprus to Florida, and it was very so appreciative time. He personally folks in division saving dozens of people during that period of time. And so it's like most people run and hide when the fire gets hot. This is something he didn't have to do, and he was over there doing it. And I can tell you, in all the political fights we've had, even though everyone always says they're going to be strong and conservative and all this stuff, when things start to hit the fans, a lot of people run and hide. And on all these issues, he's run into these fires, whether it was being leading on helping us get our immigration to where we're at. We're the #1 state helping President Trump's efforts to enforce immigration law and effectuate the removals of illegal aliens from our state. And that is ongoing, in spite of what the media may try to tell you, including at Alligator Alcatraz. And there were a lot of Republicans that tried to block that, and Jay was one of the ones that stood with us. He's also been very strong on Second Amendment. He carried the constitutional carry, which, before I was governor, they were restricting Second Amendment rights in Florida. We've been able to expand, and the legislature should do more, and I've called upon him to do more, but the most significant expansion was the constitutional permitless carry bill that he was the one that was leading behind, and then he was also the author of the bill to not allow CCP purchases of land in the state of Florida, and that's something that's really significant. So I call him the Chuck Norris of Florida politics for a reason. And just so you know, like, hopefully we don't get a storm. There is something brewing. Most of the models have it kind of being a fish storm, but that's way too early to know for sure. And you're really going to need to get in, to next week probably to have a decent track on it. We hope for the best on that. And I know certainly on the west coast of Florida, we could do a break. But, if we do have one of those storms, we're ready. We do all our stuff. But I'm not going to have him in the Emergency Operations Center with me. He's expeditionary. He's operational. So he's going to be with Jim Cantori on the ground. And he is going to be the tip of the spear for the state of Florida. So come on up.
Well, how the heck do you live up to that introduction? Thank you. I'll do my best here. Man, it is good to be here. Aren't you proud to be a citizen here in Florida, a resident of Florida? God, aren't we blessed? So if there's a theme here, and let's say it one more time, our freedoms are God-given. They're not granted by the government. They're upheld by our Constitution because strong men and women fight for them each and every day. Let's give a round of applause for these two right here. So many of you know me. I have literally broken bread and fed many of the people in this room, quite likely. And through our work with OBR, you know how I look at things. I am blessed to be Lieutenant Governor. I was blessed to serve as a Green Beret, but there is nothing on God's green earth that defines me more than being a dad and a husband. I don't know about you, but I will not fail my family, and we're all fighting to make sure we pass things on to our children better than we had it. That's the goal, right? That's what we're doing right here in Florida. Grace Christian School, thank you for opening up your doors. Thank you for having this incredible audience. Thank you. So Joe, I think, is a little bit of a sleepy here. He said he couldn't tell stories, but I think he did pretty darn good, right? That was amazing. He took us to church as well. Could you imagine where we would have been in 2020 during COVID if we didn't have leadership willing to step into the void, to take that on face first, shoulder first, and deal with a brunt of crazy train that was going on across the planet? Look, I was feeding millions of people across the country all over, and there was no place that handled it the way he did. You heard it said by Joe, and I'm going to echo that. He stood as a foothold of freedom, a foothold of common sense and logic when nobody else would. The world changed because he stood. If you don't believe one person can make a difference, you're not paying attention to Florida. So together, when you look at this, we are sending a clear message. It's the parents, not government. They have the final say when it comes to their kids' health and well-being. Let's say that one more time. It is the parents who control their families. Now, you know that as a service member, I like to throw these things in here sometimes. Freedom isn't free. It is fought for and defended, whether it's on the battlefield, whether it's in the courts, or whether it's in the courts of common sense. You have to stand up and fight for it. What we're talking about today is no difference. The principles apply exactly the same. We have to protect the rights of parents to make medical decisions for their families, to feed their families how they want, what they want, when they want, because that's their family. It is not the government's choice to tell them what to eat or how to eat. We have to control that for those families. Removing unnecessary requirements supports so many principles here in the state of Florida. Now, how many of you think that, I'm going to paraphrase Reagan a little bit here, that the government should solve all of our problems for us? Doesn't that scare you a little bit? How many veterans do we have in the audience today? All right. Love it. So when I talk about military grade, it probably means something very similar to you as it does to me. A lot of duct tape, maybe some bubble gum, and things being bid by the lowest common dollar. Guys, it's the same way with government. The government doesn't often solve the root cause. They try to, they create a second problem, often a third, and complicate the first, and we never get to the root cause of that. That is what's happened in DC, but you know what's great here? We're cutting right through the BS in Florida, and we're eliminating. We're getting government out of the way, government out of your lives, because we believe in people's right to have manifest destiny for yourselves, to control what you want to do, because those freedoms are given to you by God. They're upheld by our government. That's what we're doing in Florida. That is what we're fighting for. That is what he has stood alone for so long. That is amazing. One more round for this guy. So you know I got to be a Green Beret. I got to work around some truly amazing people for many, many years. And I'm blessed to have been a small, tiny speck in that amazing industry. But what I'm excited about here is the opportunity to serve alongside our First Lady, Casey DeSantis, Joe, and so many other people from our agencies. Because if we want to leave things better, we have to make sure what we feed our kids is clearly stated on the bag. We know what we're giving them. We know what matters. That if we want to give them an immunization, we can. If we want to live our life how we want to live it, we have that freedom. And if we don't step into the breach, if we don't push that stronghold forward and export that across the country, we're flailing and failing as parents, as leaders. And again, we will not do that here in the state of Florida. Y'all, I am so grateful to do this. I am grateful to fight to help keep our kids healthy, to leave it better than we got it, because I don't know about you, but if we're gonna get dressed up and wear a tie every single day, guys, we better do something worthwhile, something that makes a difference. And there is nothing more important than the lives of our children now and in the future, because you see, we have a responsibility as citizens of these United States. And many of you have heard me say it, but I think we gotta communicate great things. We have a responsibility to protect and preserve the things we love, those truths we hold to be self-evident, just like our forefathers did, so our kids can do the same. And when Florida leads, America wins. That's who we are. That's what we do. God bless each of you, and God bless the free state of Florida.
Well, thanks so much, Lieutenant Governor. You know, Florida, with Jay at the helm there, is of all 50 states, we're the only state that has both a governor and a lieutenant governor who are military veterans. I mean, like, that's... You know, of all the issues, well, I mean, there's just been so many that we've led the nation on, but in the education realm, Florida has truly been without peer. If you look at what we've done for universal school choice, if you look at what we've done to support our homeschool families, if you look at what we've done to support and protect parents' rights, if you look at what we've done in curriculum transparency, if you were looking what we did to be the first state to axe DEI from our public universities, on and on it goes. We've led the way on so many of these issues, and you know, we've been fortunate to have great folks at the helm of our education department, starting with Richard Corcoran, who I mentioned is now at the New College, president of New College in Sarasota, which, you know, you parents, you should look into that if you're interested in a classical education at really discount prices, because we haven't raised tuition. So the tuition for Florida residents is the exact same today as it was the day I took office, and it's the cheapest in the country. So you've got a lot of opportunities there. So Richard, he was there fighting the unions on making sure kids could go to school during COVID, making sure that we had athletics up and running, and then even when we had to fight against the gender ideology and some of the insanity that they were trying to inject in schools. Manny Diaz from Miami was our next commissioner. He's now the president of University of West Florida in Pensacola, and he's making big moves there. But he was able to usher in our universal school choice program. program, as well as so many of the other things, really perfecting the progress monitoring, which replaced the high-stake testing, and then also helping us on a lot of the university stuff. And so, you've had a lot of bold action taken on all those things. And so when we had to fill Manny's shoes, I had a guy that was working in our office as governor, Stotsi Koumoutsas, and Richard was strong, Manny was strong. I think Stasi's kind of a whole nother level of just intensity and getting the job done and making sure that we're doing what the parents and the students in this state deserve. And so whether it's taking on school unions, whether it's taking on woke ideology, you name it. And so he's only been in the position now for a few months, but he comes in, immediately starts disseminating very clear guidance about making sure that, because look, we have most school districts in Florida see the laws, see the policies, and they follow it. You have some who think that they should be able to just be a law unto themselves, and so they try to find ways to not follow policy. And I think he's made very clear that ain't going to fly. And so if you're someone like in Alachua County, you had a teacher that was attacking the student for being basically conservative, saying he was a dictator or something like that. I mean, just like the crudest, most uneducated left-wing, things putting spit out. And that's happening in our classroom. Like, if you're going to be partisan like that, at least be interesting, at least be original, and they're not even that. So he hauls them up. He hauls them up to the education department about, violating parents' rights, makes them answer the question. So all I can tell you is, if you're out there in the school districts, 90-some% of the teachers and the administrators in the school districts, understand what they need to do and are working to do it. But if you're in some of those that think somehow that you can just do what you want and that you can ignore duly passed laws or legally sound policies, all I can tell you, go ahead, make our day, because we will have Stasi on you very quickly. So I want to invite him up to say a few words.
Well, good morning, Grace Christian School. One of our proud private schools that participates in our school choice scholarships. You can tell I'm the new kid on the block because I'm last to speak. The governor always roasts me and makes the message clear that if, I'm not going to have any friends at the end of this job. But we are going to hold people accountable. We're going to make sure that students are put first every day in our schools. That is what this education system is about. I also think either the Surgeon General or the governor must have been talking to my wife when they decided who was going to be put on this MAHA commission, because I noticed I didn't make it, and she has been telling me lately I need to get on the treadmill. So hopefully I'll be able to impress her and impress them and make my way onto this, into this initiative that is really going to impact so many Floridians. I'm thankful to be here in all seriousness with the governor, with the First Lady, with the Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, who's homegrown here in Hillsborough County, and with our Surgeon General, who worked with us immediately when he got to the job and hit the ground running. At the time, I was in the General Counsel's office at the Florida Department of Education, and I remember those legal fights because I was part of it, whether it was going in an actual trial to keep our schools open, the amount of compelling testimony that you never saw reported by the media. You had Jay Bhattacharya, one of the leading medical experts in the nation, testify as one of our expert witnesses, and yet a judge still didn't find that the medical evidence was compelling, unfortunately. And then the next year, what did we do? We fought the school boards. There were 12 of them who said, even though the law prohibited mask mandates, they were going to impose them on our children anyways. And so what did we do? We dragged them in front of the State Board of Education, Alachua County, who seems to be a problem repeatedly, and Broward County, and we withheld their salaries. What did Biden do? He backfilled the salaries of those school board members, encouraging lawlessness in our state. And so we fought them, we took them to administrative court, and we won. But battle after battle, I cannot emphasize enough how many fights we were able to be victorious because of the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, I mean this with all sincerity as a parent of 4 daughters. Thank you for never wavering in the fight to put parents at the center of their children's lives and for ensuring that Florida leads the way in both education and health care. Today, we continue to fight for Florida families, whether it's parental rights and continuing to expand them, whether it's making sure that parents have the ability to object to inappropriate materials that we continue to find in our schools, or whether it's to expand programs like school choice to ensure that parents have the ability to make the best decision for their children, to send them to schools like Grace Christian, where they're not going to be exposed to that ideology. As a result of putting parents and students first, Florida continues to be nationally ranked. Heritage Foundation, 3 years in a row, says that we are #1 in education freedom. The Center for Education Reform says we're #1 when it comes to the Parent Power Index for 4 years in a row. And the Ed Choice Freedman Index finds that Florida is #1 in supporting its parents. Florida is a safe haven where parents can be parents. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. Now, today's proposed changes strengthen the rights that the governor has championed for years, and these changes reject the one-size-fits-all mandates that strips parents of choice. By removing vaccines from the required immunizations necessary to attend school and expanding exemptions to include moral and ethical convictions, we are ensuring that every parent's voice is heard and honored here in this state. This is the Florida model. I'm honored to work alongside Governor DeSantis, the First Lady, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Surgeon General to ensure that Florida remains a leader in the nation for both education and medical freedom. Together with the vision and leadership represented here today, we are proving to the nation that freedom, health, and family go hand in hand. And in Florida, so long as Ron DeSantis is our governor, it will be the free state of Florida, and parents will always be empowered. Thank you, and God bless you.
Now, if you were a recalcitrant school board member, would you want to go up against that? I wouldn't. So I appreciate Stassi. He's had an amazing start to be an education commissioner, and he hasn't let up yet. So this is going to be something that you're going to hear more about our commission. Obviously, Dr. Ladapo is going to do the health department. Basically, Florida, you know, and these have been long before I was around or Joe was around, you know, there are statutory mandates, particularly for school. Now, there are exemptions, and families are able to do that, and we've supported the exemptions over the years and expanding those. But then the Department of Health over the years, again, before I was around, they added an addition to statute. And the legislature had never passed that. I don't even know if the authority was that great to be able to do that. So anything beyond statute, Joe has the ability to bring back. So that's what he is going to do. The rest would require changes from the legislature, but ultimately, you know, we just trust people to be able to make great decisions. Now, on the commission, you know, we're going to tackle, you know, everything that people are concerned about, and just try to, you know, COVID was very eye-opening because they were telling us things that were not factually true, and that there needs to be a check and balance against that. And so there may be opportunities for us to do. Now, I do think in Washington now you have a movement to try to fix some of this stuff, and I think it's tough because I think there's a lot of stuff out there that creates static. But I do think that's the intention, which is good. But we need to be here and we need to be able to provide this. I mean, Jay Bhattacharya, he's the head of NIH now. At the time, he was at Stanford medical PhD, MD. And he was basically saying, hey, the masks aren't effective. They shouldn't be on kids. And they, pretty much burned him in effigy at Stanford for saying something that was just accurate and consistent with the data. So we don't want to be in a situation where narrative triumphs over the data and the facts. And that's what ultimately we got to rely on, and that's what we want to be able to do. Finally, I just want to be able to say, I mentioned this storm. Like I said, it's a long way off in terms of getting a good track. These models have it being a fish storm. But that's true until it's not, right? I mean, it's too early to set that in stone. So as we get into next week, we'll see. But I would just remind people right now, pretty much mid-August to mid-October is kind of the height. But as we get deeper into September, that is like the height of frequency for when we have tropical activities. And you look last year, we had late September, early October for the two back-to-back. Hurricane Ian was later part of September. And so that's just the reality. If this one becomes a fish storm, then that buys you a little more time to get through. I hope we can get through with not having any. I think it'd be really good for the state of Florida. We're very resilient in the face of these. You look at what happened last year with Debbie, then you had Helene, then you had Milton. If that had happened in almost any other state, it would be like irrecoverable. Like it would just be. Now we bounce back. Now there's a lot that needs to be done, and these things, they can't just happen overnight. But the power restoration, getting the, we pushed the local governments to clean the debris, and I know some of them did good, some of them may not, but we were pushing them. I sent trucks down to help with debris before Milton, and they locked the landfill in Pinellas County, so we barricaded through the landfill, the locks, and we took the debris in there, and we were not going to be denied. So we're happy to do it. We're ready to do it. We're more resilient. People get there's a culture of Florida, if it's a Category 1, you keep the barbecue going. A Category 2, maybe you decide to do a little, and only if it's a 3 or above. People kind of get. I'm not advocating that attitude, but that's the attitude that's there. And people kind of get hey, we have a great state to live in. It's beautiful, particularly during most parts of the year. It's paradise. I will tell you though, the weather's gotten a lot better. We got that cold front going across. So it's definitely better than it was, 3-4 weeks ago. So people get that, but it would be really good to not have one. But we're watching it, and we'll continue to watch it going forward. Okay, do we got any questions back there? The race for what? Governor of what? Florida. Oh, look. Yeah, I'm not supporting Paul Renner. I think it was an ill-advised decision to enter the race. Well, I think so. On the Department of Health, do you want to address those specific vaccines that are on? It's like hepatitis. Some of the ones that would not have been required when I was growing up, for example. I think by and large. Okay, so you can do that. So that'll happen, and then the rest will be. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a big medical freedom package. I think that you should not ever be discriminated against, regardless of these choices. And so I think it's wrong for pediatricians to refuse to see a patient if the child's parents don't want them taking the hepatitis vaccine. I think that's wrong, and it's coercive. And what it does is it tries to undercut your ability to choose by almost kind of ostracizing people that have made different decisions. And these are all very marginal things. As I said, they didn't do hepatitis when I was a kid. But I think what we'll have is a larger package. I think that Joe will lead on this and be working with legislatures on this. But we need to make all the protections I talked about that we enacted are not permanent law. They did it temporarily, then they extended it. I want it to be permanent. And I suspect, and I'm concerned about that, because I think some of these folks, in the legislature may be like, oh, well, if we can just wait the governor out, then we know, that after that, then this stuff will somehow lapse. And that's not right. It was wrong to do vaccine passports in 2021. It's wrong to do them in 2025, and it will be wrong to do them in 2035, and we need to make that permanent. So there'll be a broad package. I think there'll be an array of things, and I think this commission will help inform some of those proposals. But they'll just track our basic principles: informed consent, parental rights, and individual responsibility and medical freedom. So some of the stuff we tried to get last year, like the permanent COVID, the protections against the coercion, they extended it, but they did not do the permanent. And so we're going to try again on that. Now, the mandate issue with the schools, that's Joe called me last night and said, hey, this is where I think we should shoot for. Are you okay if I do it? And I said, shoot for the moon, man. You're the Surgeon General. If you think this is good, do it. So he's going to be working with the legislature. I don't think he's had a chance to discuss this with them. We knew we were making the announcement about the non-statutory mandates. Well, first of all, it's one thing if a legislature enacts something and a governor signs it, but to just have an agency issue a mandate, I don't think that that's appropriate. So I think what he's doing is absolutely right on that, irrespective of even the medical, which I think, as he's pointed out, is probably not something that, the reasonable people can make different decisions on those. But just from a constitutional perspective, it's like to just give an agency roving authority to issue mandates. I don't think that's good constitutional government. So he's reeling that in. I think that'll be good. So the question on mRNA COVID shots, Joe Ladapo and his agency were the first to put out guidance. So we were the first to say, kids should not be taking this. They don't need it. And then he has now recommended for probably a couple years now, certainly at least a year, that this is just not something that's recommended, period. But we don't have it's not our issue. It's a federal issue about whether that has authorization or whether that is available. I know they're discussing that in Washington about whether they would potentially revoke authorization or do something on that. But from the state of Florida, he's made that very clear as to what he recommends, but we didn't approve it. That was federally approved, and it's available based on federal policy. And I think, as most people know, a state is not going to be able to revoke a federal authorization. So we'll see what happens there. I know they're discussing it in Washington, and I don't know what the latest on that is. Is that the one where the people wanted to rebuild from the hurricanes? Yeah, so listen, I have vetoed bills that, have tried to preempt local in the past. I've signed bills that have done it. And on this one, the reason why I thought these people needed relief is because their storm gets damaged, their home gets damaged by a major hurricane. They want to go out and restore their home to what it was like before the storm hits, and the local governments are telling them you can't do it. You got to do something else. What right do they have to tell you you can't rebuild your home? This isn't California. This is Florida. So that, to me, is the core issue. I didn't write the bill. I know there's other provisions in that, but I felt compelled to sign it because I think in Florida, if you have damage to your home and you go to rebuild it and to restore it to what it looked like the day before that storm hit, you should be permitted to do it. The government cannot prevent you from doing that, and these local governments were not allowing that. They were being difficult. So we got a lot of complaints about that. Obviously, those were more local decisions at the time. But it's like, come on. I mean, like, we had a lot of sympathy for people that were put in that predicament. And, there's a lot of issues that go on. I mean, sometimes you'll have people who need work on their home. Maybe they have a wind policy. There were some people that were not even in flood zones that got flooding. And so they didn't, but the people told them you don't need flood insurance because it doesn't, and then somehow they get flooded. Well, okay, so they don't have an insurance claim then, so they got to go do this out of pocket. And to put in roadblocks for them to be able to restore their property, I think is just not acceptable. So I am going to be in favor of people being able to restore their property after these storms. You look at what happens in California with those fires, people can't get permits to rebuild their homes. It's been many, many months. And then you have people in those local governments. Pacific Palisades is like, it's like you aspire your whole life to be able to live in a place that beautiful and everything. And yeah, it's more upscale, no question about it. And they want to use that for affordable housing. And I'm thinking, what right do you have? It's private property. But they can restrict and they can do all these other things. So I think in Florida, that piece to me is there. I don't know, they may be challenging other provisions. I didn't write the bill. There may be things in there that in a perfect world I would not have necessarily agreed to, but I did feel compelled to stand up for the homeowners who were getting stymied by local governments, and I thought that they deserved a right to be able to restore their property to where it was prior to the storm. Hopefully we don't have to deal with that issue going forward. I also push, this is like, some of the frustrations you deal with. So we have we had 3 hurricanes, 2 majors, and the 2 majors really impacted similar areas in many respects. Now, Helene didn't hit land in the Tampa Bay, but it caused a lot of surge. Then you had Milton come in that probably wasn't as much surge, but wind and all this other stuff. And that was like back to back. And so, one of the things that I called on the legislature to do at the beginning of the year in a special session is to fully fund the My Safe Florida Home program, which was started. It had been something that the state had done in the past. I resuscitated it a few years back because you can apply for grants, you get matching grants, you fortify your home, and then you can then apply for discounts on your insurance. And so we wanted to help people with that, given all the inflation that was going on in the economy. And so we did it, and it was successful. Then we did it again, then we did it again. Well, what happened after last fiscal year, so summer of '24, you had massive numbers of people that applied for it, and so the money ran out. So you had a lot of people that were on a waiting list, but the legislature needed to replenish the coffers. So what I said in January is, okay, let's take that waiting list, let's find every home on that waiting list that was impacted by these most recent storms. Let's do a special appropriation and let's get those grants out there. They need to rebuild anyways. Why not let them utilize this and be able to get it done? And then this way, if you do it at the beginning of the year, they could be set up before hurricane season. And instead, they rejected doing that in January. It was the speaker. I think a lot of the members wanted to do it. They rejected doing it. And so then you wait. They didn't even do the budget till the end of June. And then the budget didn't even have enough to clear the waiting list on it. So it's one thing, you don't have to do these programs, but if you do a program and people are on a waiting list and they're expecting this, I would want to clear that waiting list and get them the grants so that they can do these home improvements. And I just fear that, now money's going out. I don't think it's enough to even clear the waiting list. I know more people are going to apply, but it's like, okay, if you get grant money in August or September, which is, at the beginning, it's the beginning part of the fiscal year still, can you even do these repairs in time for hurricane season to be done? So they missed a huge opportunity, I think, to be able to provide meaningful relief for people who really needed it. And here's the thing about it. Doing these grant programs, it's not necessarily that natural for somebody, like me who's like, we're market-based, government programs typically haven't worked. But in this instance, you're providing an ability for people to make really significant fortifications. They can apply for reduction in insurance. They're more likely to stay in their home as a result. And then when the next storm comes, that home's going to do better. and it's going to be less burden and less cost on taxpayers, on the community, less interruption. So it's been something that's been very effective. It's been very popular, and I wish that they had funded that. I was, you know, some of these things don't get a lot of attention, right? I mean, January, you know, people were focusing on the inauguration of Trump 47. Understandably, it was a big deal. They weren't paying as much attention to what was going on in Tallahassee. Not as much media coverage about that. That's why they thought they could get away with doing this amnesty bill that I vetoed. And Jay Collins was standing with me and standing up for you to say, no, we're going to take illegal immigration seriously. But I think it was because, you know, they thought there wasn't as much attention, so they can do it. The condos. People were getting these crushing condo assessments. I said, why don't we do that at the beginning of the year, give people peace of mind, so we know that they can stay in their condos and we're not going to have these artificial barriers. They didn't do anything until like May on that. Well, more assessments were coming in. A lot of people were very apprehensive about their future, and I was saying, we got to do it, we got to do it. You know, and eventually we did it, but it's like, you know, if you really care for people, you should have gotten off your tush. You should have